Welcome! You are listening to the Overseas Life Redesign podcast, where you'll hear fun, relaxed, and inspirational interviews with people who are really living the dream. I'm Dawn Fleming, an attorney turned alchemist, and your host for the show, coming to you from the tropical island paradise of Isla Mujeres, Mexico. This show was created for courageous souls willing to step out of their comfort zone and design a new way of life. You'll gain inspired midlife wisdom from those who have done it as we share experiences, strategies, and offer practical steps you can take to redesign your life overseas. Listen and you'll believe if you can dream it, you can achieve it. Happy Monday. Welcome to Magnetic Monday with Dawn. Today is March 14th. 2022, and I am looking forward to an exciting week. Today, I am going to talk with you about the politics of healthcare and why taking charge is really a matter of life or death. And my intention for you with this talk today is for you to walk away with knowing why it is so important to take responsibility for healthcare and not always rely on the professionals to keep us healthy. That's not to say that, they're not to listen to your doctor. I'm not trying to say that at all. Instead, what I hope to convey to you is that there are forces and powers that be that do not have our health as the main driver in the decisions that are made. So we have to be very good at discerning what is profit-driven and what is health-driven, and really what is in our best interest to live a healthy life, right? So I'm going to try, I've really tried hard today to not get in the weeds too much, trying to just simplify. There's just so much information that I could bring in this talk today, but I do think it's worth sort of a cursory dive into the history of healing and medicine, and understanding that really gives us power, and it also allows us to see how some really ancient historical philosophies drive behavior in our modern era. As you all probably know, Hippocrates, who lived in 2060 BC, is kind of known as the father of medicine, right? Doctors take the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. And then Galen in 130 to 200 BC actually was more influential than Hippocrates has been in modern medicine. Of course, Jesus came along and he was known as a healer. And he said, we all have the power to heal. And I know Christianity is quite popular. There's a lot of folks that believe in that faith. And it's part of the historical process of traditional medicine and traditional healing, the power of prayer, really getting into that. But during the Dark Ages, which was from about 476 AD until the 11th century, the intellectual pursuits were largely left to the clergy, right? Clerical institutions. And so we had medieval monasteries and convents that were really early medical clinics. Back then, lay healers shared the practice of medicine with their religious counterparts. But by the Middle Ages, it had all changed. All healing was done by physicians, and they were largely followers of Galen. And the church actually banned the use of herbal remedies in favor of more complex and expensive treatments that were, of course, prescribed by licensed physicians. And the practice of unlicensed natural medicine was actually forbidden. And if you engaged in it, you had the possibility you would be charged with quackery or witchcraft. And so women who were actually physicians in the 13th century were subsequently condemned as witches and charlatans in the 14th and 15th centuries. And up until the 19th century, women were largely banned as physicians. By the mid-19th century, more women were demanding that they be allowed to go to medical school. And Elizabeth Garrett Anderson actually became the first English female doctor. But despite her desire to practice, not one British medical school would accept her. So undaunted by that, she decided to go to nursing school instead. And then she was able to sit for exams through the Society of Apothecaries in 1865. It was a loophole that existed at the time for her to actually become a doctor. And she would actually be the last woman to take that route, because the next year they cut off that path and it was not possible to get licensed that way. So she had campaigned for and helped pass an 1876 law that authorized the licensure of both men and women doctors in England. And I share this brief history today just to kind of briefly illustrate how the role of power in medicine, healing, and healthcare has shifted through the ages. But let's fast forward to today. I've got 3 principles that I'm going to share with you. So the first one is that in this day and age, unfortunately, big pharma profits trump public health. I want to share one illustration of that. There's many. I'm going to talk about a couple of others later on, but there's a condition that's actually quite prevalent called age-related macular degeneration, AMD. Causes blindness. And until 2005, there was no treatment for this condition that causes loss of sight and is the leading cause of blindness. And on April 30th of 2012, the NIH, National Institute of Health, actually had a press release that said studies show that 2 drugs, Avastin and Lucentis, were equivalent in treating age-related macular degeneration. And Avastin was actually a drug that was developed to treat colon cancer. But by accident, a doctor found that it helped AMD, and there was nothing else on the market at that time to do that. So because it was an existing drug that was used for something else, and that happens a lot. We hear that all the time about Viagra was a heart medication that had this little side effect, right, that ended up having it prescribed for a different use. And a glaucoma treatment led to Latisse. It was a product that makes your eyelashes grow. It was a side effect from this glaucoma treatment. So, but when that happens, usually there's not the financial incentive for a full-blown medical study, because like the drug's already approved and it's already has a use. So to do that for, and especially if it's an inexpensive drug, if it's gone off patent, if there's generics, then, the financial incentive is really not there. So there was no incentive. So the doctor and a pharmacist actually conducted the study to see, does this really work in a controlled medical trial environment? And they were astounded by how well this colon cancer drug worked on people that had this horrible disease that caused blindness without any treatment or cure. So the research was presented that the doctor and the pharmacist conducted, and ophthalmologists around the world began prescribing the inexpensive drug with huge success. And for the first 6 to 12 months, only Avastin was prescribed, and it cost around $50. It really was not expensive. But then Lucentis was introduced, and it was specifically for AMD at a cost of $1,000 in Europe, but $2,000 in the United States, because drug prices are controlled in Europe, but not in the United States. And of course, due to the lower cost, Avastin was the preferred drug, but it came in bottles. The doses were in bottles. And for AMD treatment, it needed to be repackaged into syringes because the dosage was much lower than that which came in the bottles. But Roche, the manufacturer, refused to package it that way. So it placed an undue burden on these medical facilities, which actually had to take the little bottles and break it down themselves with sterile syringes. It was very labor intensive to do this. So they ended up, it was such a hassle, it was such a burden on these medical facilities to repackage it, and when the drug company refused, that they ended up using the higher priced drug. Now, Roche doesn't sell Lucentis, but it was actually protecting a fellow drug cartel member that owns 1/3 of Roche, and that's Novartis. And I'm going to talk about that more in a little bit, the drug cartel situation. So the fact of the matter is that all drug companies seek blockbuster drugs. They're profit-driven companies, right? They're looking for a drug that treats widespread diseases worldwide. And they don't like it when drugs for one purpose are repurposed and then prescribed for another medical issue, because it hurts that profit driven model. So let's dive into point number 2 a little bit, which is how the medical industry is really designed for control. And history actually shows us that power is a driver in the industry. For this, we're going to shift really to the United States. So prior to 1910, the medical profession in the United States, believe it or not, was actually unregulated. Training was minimal, and you could actually purchase a degree by mail. So doctors actually didn't have a very good reputation in the eyes of the public. Now, the American Medical Association was founded in 1847. And because of this status of the medical industry, it had a strong desire to clean up the reputation of the industry. In 1908, Henry S. Pritchett, who was president of the Carnegie Foundation, met with the AMA Council of Education. And what resulted was the Flexner Report. In it, it summarized the deficiencies in medical education at the time and made recommendations to improve it. Sounds good, noble cause. Some of those were adding research and development departments at, training universities, and the broadening of pharmacology. So we want to expand drugs, right? So you've got the Carnegie and Rockefeller foundations now beginning to generously fund medical schools that embraced those goals. And they actually withheld funds from schools that did not follow those principles. So they basically hit the American Medical Association at a time when it was vulnerable. They were looking for sort of reinventing themselves and what they were doing. And these foundations came in and said, oh, we'll help you, right? And they were able to steer how the medical education industry was ultimately going to reform itself.
We'll be back in a moment.
Isla Mujeres is a Caribbean jewel off the coast of Cancun. Castilito del Caribe warmly invites you to enjoy our spectacular oceanfront villa located in the heart of El Centro and a short walk to Playa Norte, which is ranked one of the top 10 beaches in the world. With an ocean view of crystal clear turquoise waters overlooking both the Caribbean and Cancun city skyline, we offer a fabulous location for you to enjoy all the peace and tranquility you're looking for on vacation, while also taking in all the excitement the island has to offer, with activities either in walking distance or a golf cart day excursion away. Please visit CastelitoCaribe.com, www.CastelitoCaribe.com. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Is it time to go? Are you starving for adventure and new experiences? Ready to lower your living costs and upgrade your quality of life? Do you long for the freedom to live anywhere with the economic satisfaction of earning in paradise? Imagine waking up in paradise every day saying, "Pinch me, is this real?" You can live a happier, healthier, and more joyful life. Don't know where to start? Then grab our free Paradise Checklist to begin dreaming again and start defining your paradise. It's waiting for you at paradisechecklist.com.
Welcome back to the Overseas Life Redesign podcast. Thank you so much for being here, and we invite you to subscribe if you like what you hear. As I said, the foundation, so the Carnegie and Rockefeller foundations withheld funds that did not adopt those goals. And so as a result, from 1905 until 1927, the number of medical schools that existed in the United States shrunk by 50%. And some of them probably should have been shut down anyway, but it was really a consolidation of power. So there were a much lower number of medical schools. Think about this, and I know this to be true because my first husband was a physician, so I kind of, saw this whole indoctrination process. But a doctor cannot obtain an MD degree without attending an AMA accredited school. The AMA is the one that sets the standards for the internship and the residency programs. Doctors become licensed physicians under the framework that was developed by the AMA, and the doctors practice according to the state laws that were developed in concert with the AMA. Doctors are kept informed and up to date by AMA publications. And if you don't know this, the AMA is an extremely powerful lobbying group that wields tremendous power in Washington, D.C. Who controls the AMA? Well, you'd think it would be the members, right? That's what we would assume. But no, that's not quite the case. And so let's follow the money. Turns out the president of the American Medical Association is an honorary position without real power. And in fact, they can't run for the position because it's beneath the organization. Is actually a rule for that. But the position has absolutely no administrative or executive duties. Instead, that role is filled by a chief of staff that obviously probably doesn't change very often as a new president comes into power. So basically all the AMA president does is give speeches. And dues from the doctor's membership could not support this behemoth organization. The revenue actually comes to the American Medical Association through advertising that is purchased for the publication, the AMA Journal, by, you guessed it, Big Pharma. So whoever pays the piper calls the tune, as it were. In 1972, Nixon passed a law known as the PSRO, which was the Professional Standards Review Organization. And it authorized the Department of Health, Education, Welfare to create regional boards that oversee the medical profession and doctors. The boards were then authorized to force doctors to comply with standardized treatments, procedures, and prescriptions to conform to these federal standards or risk being suspended from practice. I got a lot of power. Patient records that were previously confidential after the implementation of this law, were now able to be accessed by the government at any time. So they could go look at those charts. As it turns out, the law was drafted by the American Medical Association legal department, never voted on or approved by AMA members. And if you're not aware of it, there's this revolving door that we're seeing with pharmaceutical representatives and executives that are involved with the government regulatory bodies. And in fact, the U.S. Federal Food and Drug Association is actually on the payroll of the pharmaceutical industry. And it's a really cruel business model when you start pulling back the curtain and looking at the money that is in this industry and the emphasis on profits, as I said earlier, rather than public health. So that turns to sort of the third point of this third leg of the stool that I'm describing today, and that is the use of private foundations. And that's how essentially the Carnegie and Rockefeller foundations were able to gain control over the medical industry in the United States. In 1913, when the Federal Reserve System was created, the newly minted income tax framework had a special carve out for the wealthy because they weren't going to, go ahead and implement this income tax and then, the folks that created this Federal Reserve, the big banks and the moneyed families that controlled them weren't going to be subject to that, right? Only the little people pay taxes. So in it was introduced the tax-exempt private foundation. This framework is how multinational corporations and their principals pay no taxes. And by using these entities, these private foundations, they're able to control everything and own nothing, at least in their names. The assets are transferred into these tax-exempt foundations, and yet the transferor retains all the same control as if they held them in their own name. They're used to avoid inheritance taxes, in addition to lowering income taxes. And the reason why tax reform will never lead to any meaningful change. The foundations have been used very effectively to not only produce maximum results from a tax standpoint, but also as a tool to affect the changes the donor wants. So to bequeath these charitable contributions, like to the AMA and to these public universities and teaching organizations, hospitals, right? Think about the large foundations that fund, whether it's hospitals, whether it's, medical organizations like the American Cancer Society, the March of Dimes. I mean, any of the big health charities, you will see these large corporations donating funds, but they come with strings attached. Because what happens is typically these funds also come with the ask that, we want to install board members. Excuse me. We want to install board members of our choosing. And so they're able to place people that they control that are in alignment with their political interests when it comes to, pharmaceuticals or the delivery of healthcare. So one of the rationales that we hear time and time again from the industry is, the reason the cost of drugs is so high is because of R&D, research and development. The problem with that argument is that much of that work is done through taxpayer funding through the National Institute of Health that goes to public universities and hospitals. And then Big Pharma buys the patents that result from those for a song a lot of times, and then they make obscene profits off of life-saving drugs. There are countless examples. I could be here all day probably and talk about that, but you may remember the big scandal that took place around the EpiPen. And when that was bought by another pharmaceutical company and the price soared, it was a big deal. It was in the news. There's a drug called Solvati that actually cures hepatitis C, which they estimate there's 71 million people globally that have this. Gilead owns it, but the research and development was actually funded by NIH. It's a 3-month treatment regimen, and you're cured. This horrible disease, hepatitis C, which destroys the liver, was a death sentence. This is truly a life-saving drug. And in the United States, this 3-month treatment plan, it's 12-week treatment plan, pills, costs $84,000, basically $1,000 a pill. In the European Union, it sells for half that. It's $42,000. Why? Because they have price controls in the European Union where they don't in the United States. And in fact, it sells for even less in France because they were able to negotiate a lower price still. So the same treatment that costs $84,000 in the United States costs $24,000 in France. But it gets better. An agency of the World Health Organization actually negotiated with the manufacturer to create a generic version that could be produced in developing countries. And so they, basically sold them this story that, by widening distribution, you're still going to make money. We're going to sell this generic version. And it costs $80 in the Southern Hemisphere in these developing countries. However, it's not available in the Northern Hemisphere. You can't get it in developed countries. So much for this idea that, we have the best medicine, we have the best medical care in the United States. No, you're getting fleeced by the medical industry and big pharma that have gotten together to control the healthcare system. It's not really a healthcare system, in my opinion. It's a sickness care system. We treat symptoms. We don't treat causes. We write prescriptions. We don't prescribe nutrition. In fact, I can tell you that in the 4 years that I was with my first husband during his medical career, there was not one class that he took in medical school on nutrition. And time again, studies have shown and continue to show the value of your diet, how much a healthy diet can not only prevent disease, but also heal when things are out of whack. If somebody hasn't been eating well, they can change and see dramatic changes, whether it's inflammation and using diet to control that, or any number of other ailments that we have. And that's why it is so important. And here's the thing. Most doctors, your family doctor that cares about you, probably isn't even aware of what I just spoke with you about today. They've been duped. They've gone along in the system. They've been indoctrinated into the system. They didn't know any better. They went into the medical profession to heal, usually to help people. At one time, it was much more lucrative to go into the medical field and be a doctor, but private practice has shrunk. And the money really is in big pharma. And so a lot of doctors have gotten into that research and development. In fact, most of the medical schools look specifically for students who are interested in going into research because it is such a lucrative part of these educational institutions that funding to be able to develop and market new pharmaceutical drugs. So I know it's not a very enlightening topic today, but I really, before we start moving on, and because it is so closely tied to the next quarter topic, which is wealth, I wanted to dig into this idea of taking health and really following the money. Let me know your feedback on this, if any of this is surprising to you, if this is familiar, and let me know what your comments and questions are. Thanks so much.
This episode of the Overseas Life Redesign podcast was brought to you by our sponsors. Thanks for tuning in. Did you love this episode of the Overseas Life Redesign podcast? Then please subscribe to our show and leave us a nice review. It's very much appreciated. We invite you to visit paradisechecklist.com and download our free Paradise Checklist to start your journey. We'd also love for you to become part of our Claim Your Dream Life community. Thank you for listening.